like it means nothing.
Here, it's nice seeing my friends here. So I'm going to talk to you guys about Cloud Custodian and how we succeeded with it at Bolt. Let's start with a few questions. Show of hands. How many of you are working in cybersecurity? Nice. How many of you are working in cloud security? Also nice. How many of you are working on AWS cloud security? That's a lot of people. Awesome. So a little bit about me as well. My name is Johannes. I'm a senior cloud security engineer at Bolt. Previously, I spent 3.5 years doing security, compliance, everything at a startup called QMinder. I trained the Estonian cybersecurity national team. Been playing CTF since 2018. I have 2 cats, and I like things that go fast. So here's how we'll spend the next 28 minutes. We're going to talk about how Bolt does cloud security, what we actually do in the cloud, and we're going to kind of talk about the approach that we've seen in cloud security and kind of the stops, what we want to kind of fix. Then we're going to talk about Cloud Custodian. That's kind of the topic of this presentation. I'm going to show you guys a few demos. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to operationalize Cloud Custodian. And that's basically it. There's not going to be Q&A. No questions, but you can talk Q&A later at the bar. So at Bolt, we use AWS for everything. We use it for our backend. We use it for our data platform. We have our logs, metrics, traces hosted on AWS, our websites, and our extensive geo platform. We also have some supporting infrastructure like mapping, map marker generation, all of the different analytics and data-driven stuff that our teams want. This can lead to a lot of sprawl. Most of the stuff is in Terraform. We have about 10,000 Terraform resources across 40 AWS accounts. We have a few petabytes in our data analytics platform. We have a bunch of managed services. We love S3, we love EKS, CloudFront. And as every company, we have some old stuff in the corner. Right now, our cloud security practices are simple and developer-driven. Our engineers use AWS via templates and code generation. They don't get AWS API keys. Our templates are designed with the security team being involved. We have CSPM running across everything. We turned on the CIS benchmarks, like probably each and every one of you who raised the hand when they're working on AWS Cloud Security. And we have some guidelines in Confluence talking about secure cloud usage. Is this enough? No. This gets us to 61%. But we want more. That's what we're seeing right now. We see 61%. We see some CSPM findings that don't really matter. We see a lot of resources that have been abandoned. For example, somebody had a really good idea to launch a business somewhere. They set everything up. Halfway through, they decided, nope, no ROI. Let's turn it back off, but don't clean up the AWS. And from cloud security, we have been struggling getting from 61 to 100%, or even 90 would be good. So this is kind of what we see in cloud security, is that most of the times, a business starts off seeing their cloud security mistakes in live. They're kind of, oh my God, somebody turned on the public bucket. All of our files are public. Especially good if it's found internally, not externally. Some better companies could be doing a pre-live environment where they see the errors first. And that's basically all that CSPM gives us. We want to go further. We want to see the errors before they happen. So as with majority of the companies here, we do some of this shift left stuff that's really popular. We have our CI checking for security mistakes. We have a pre-commit linter. And in some cases, your VS Code tells you that you're being stupid. That's the best case. And don't get me wrong, shift left works brilliantly. The tools are there. You can use Chekhov, VS Code plugins, Sonar. The tools are there. Do use it. But we want more. Because shift left doesn't really cover emergency changes. It doesn't cover all the infrastructure that's outside of Terraform. It doesn't cover infrastructure that has been set up in Bolt's cloud by Bolt's partners. It also doesn't cover testing infrastructure, and it also doesn't cover when somebody leaks their credentials and then some cloud changes show up. Also, are we realistically going to get to 100% IAC? If our businesses say, come on, just make this work. Let's go. We need to launch tomorrow. Just do it. Come on, we need to do that. I don't want to do Terraform and testing. Why? I just set up some infra quickly. And I mean, you've obviously heard this sentence before. This is only a small-scale test. We don't need to do everything in Terraform. We're getting rid of it for prod. Have you gotten rid of it for prod? Are you still using that infra for prod? And this is one other thing we're struggling with. The CSPM itself isn't perfect. This is my experience based on the tools that I've seen. Probably if you guys have some silver bullet here, we'll be happy to know about it. But in our experience, we turn on CIS, that's it. We don't really have the business context behind the reasons why these findings are coming. This can lead to alert fatigue. So our cloud security team would just be cycling through the same alert every month, seeing, OK, yeah, this issue is popping up. We know why this is. We just bored with alerts. This leads to alert fatigue. And we really don't see the flexibility. So I wonder if somebody's thought about it. So in AWS, the teams have been smart. They've made AWS easy to wire things together. You can hook up your EC2 to your Lambda. You can hook up Lambda to S3. You can do all these things. Especially clever is that you can do automations based on CloudTrail, based on AWS config. You can customize basically everything if you spend the time. Now, I won't go through the intricacies of writing an AWS Lambda script that can be used as a config rule execution module, because I really don't remember it at all. It's insane. So what if somebody has built something for us that I can focus on the cloud side, and it will generate the rest for me? Now, you kind of know where I'm leading up to, because that's the tool. So introducing Cloud Custodian. This is a simple-ish tool. It's open source. It's online. So what it tells you is that from the cloud security side, you're going to be working in YAML. And I know that all of you are YAML programmers. It supports a wide variety of AWS resources, some GCP stuff, some Azure stuff, some Kubernetes stuff. You can use a CLI to start up with, and you can scale up to different automations, like the one that I shared about CloudTrail before. But before we get to that, one of the key things I would like to mention here is the support for automatic enforcement. This is really cool. So let's go through one of these policies. So let's say I'm a smart business. I'm going to set up my cloud in a way that people who really want to make an S3 bucket cannot do so if they want to set up public access. There's no need for it today. So let's go through the steps. I'm looking for S3 buckets. There's a ton of things you can look at that are not blocking publicly. Again, a ton of things you can look at. And for each of these findings, turn on public blocking. And what you can do is you can change the run mode. So all in all, this simple setup gives you a lead to finding all of your S3, turning on public blocking, and going proactive with it. You can keep doing this continuously. So people are using Cloud Custodian for really weird things. You can set up alerting if somebody uses a root account. People use it for requesting quota increases if their EC2 quota gets full. People are using it to automatically clean up autoscale groups that they no longer need. People are also using it to do really weird stuff. They're setting up autoscaling that are based on the office hours of the business, so they could scale some clusters to 0 if they're no longer needed. OK, but enough about the theory. Let's get to demos. First demo. I'm kind of interested in Cloud Custodian. I would like to know what it can find for me. Let's use it as a simple CLI search engine to get a lay of the land. This is really good if you're kind of enumerating what to do with Cloud Custodian, getting a list of the resources, and just kind of playing around with CLI. So let me show you a quick CLI example. I'm going to be looking for any EC2 machines that have not been tagged correctly. People love tagging. I'm going to look for EC2 machines that either have the owner missing or a cost center missing. I'm going to run this policy. Boom. What I see, 2 resources. That would be really good to know which of these 2 resources, or which are they. So I'm going to change to reporting mode. And here you go. I get a CSV file. So this is what we've learned, is that it is these 2 machines. If I want to see something more detailed, there's actually a metadata file you can search through. But cloud security experts love Excel, so you already got your CSV file. You go to Excel, and that's your answer. You can play around with it. You can color the rows red and green if you want to delete it or not. And you're already delivering value. Now let's go deeper. Let's say I have a really good CSPM use case for business-specific alerting. Let's say our cloud security team has made a decision. We want to clean up some unused resources, so find them for me and send me an alert. Let's go through this example as well. I'm looking for security groups that are named Launch Wizard. This is a really cool filter because it gives you all of the security groups that people are creating when they're using ClickOps to set up EC2 machines. So let's set up an alert that filters for security groups with the name Launch Wizard asterisk. After I run it, it's going to give me a list of results. And what I can do with this alert is send them to Security Hub or a webhook or wherever I want. Since it's running in AWS config, it's going to keep monitoring in the background. It's setting up an automation to do it every time somebody creates a security group. And you're getting the full list of resources in AWS config. You can export it to all of your other tools. That's pretty neat. You can even use their mail system, but in Bolt, we're not that heavy on email, so that's something I haven't really explored. OK, now here's where it gets interesting. Let's go for automated enforcement. As I said before, we're looking for S3 buckets that have public access turned on. This means that there's a theoretical chance that if you set a file with an ACL public, anybody from the internet can go ahead and download it. Now, in the first year of cloud adoption, maybe you're rushing through, maybe you use this. In the second year, you're not going to need this. And let's go through the steps here. I'm going to create a Cloud Custodian policy that's going to be listening to CloudTrail events and filtering all of the CloudTrail events related to S3 buckets, putting and deleting the public access block. And after these events run, I'm going to check if the bucket has now been set to public, and if so, I'm going to turn public blocking back on. So let's set this up and deploy it. This will create me a Lambda script and an appropriate event badge rule so that the CloudTrail events will be pumped through my Lambda script. And let's try it out. I'm going to create a bucket called CCU demo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and turn off the block public access setting. And I'm going to acknowledge that this is a bit of a problem, go through all the steps, create a bucket. Now, within a few seconds, let's go back to this bucket. As you can see, yes, it was created with public access blocking on. This is because the turnaround time for the event flying through CloudTrail to Event Bridge to Lambda, it's not instant. You can see, yeah, block public access is off. But in a few seconds, block public access is back on. Amazing. If you want to know how to execute it, if you want to see the audit logs, you can actually go to Lambda, CloudWatch, events, and it's just going to output the logs into the log group there. You can just ingest these logs and see what it's doing. This is really cool, actually, because I think all of you have had some cloud rules that people just want to bypass all the time. They're not going through Terraform. They're turning everything back on. And we're really not OK with it. This is especially good for S3 buckets with public access, which is probably one of the most common ways to fuck up your AWS. That's going to be really useful for security groups that let 0000 access your systems. And that's also for test infrastructure that people have exposed a little too publicly. Now, let's say I'm not that tough. Let's say my security leadership team has told me, you can set up these things, but don't break anything. Now that gives us a bit of an issue, because automated enforcement, amazing. But if I've been told to avoid issues, if I've been told not to break things, then I need something better. What Cloud Custodian gives us for this is what's called mark and sweep. So what you're going to do is you're going to set up a pair of Cloud Custodian runs, one to detect any issues, and the second one to clean up. And you're going to give a delay between these two. So find me all of the unused security groups, notify the user, and wait 10 days before automatically destroying them. Now, this is what we're going to see in the last demo here. Demo 4. We're going to be looking for unused security groups with the filter called unused, which is some genius at Cloud Custodian has figured out how to detect if a security group isn't attached to anything. We're going to mark it for deletion in a single day. And then after a single day is done, we're actually going to go ahead and delete it. So as you can see, the actions are an array. You could be notifying the user. You could be sending a SIEM alert. You could be setting up a security hop finding for this. And what this does is that, how this actually works is that after I run this, the tracking for this data, so how does it know to wait for a day before deleting it, the tracking for this is actually going to be stored in the security group's tags. So as you can see, launch wizard, if I go to the tags, you can find, after a simple reload, you're going to find that the launch wizard has had a new tag called resource does not meet policy, delete on the 15th of February. And if you run this policy again on the 15th, then it's actually going to clean up the security group. That's really useful for kind of tipping your toes into automated enforcement while still providing some sort of guarantees that you're not blowing people's stuff up. But I mean, why do we need those public policies? Maybe it makes sense to enforce it anyway. The thing about mark and sweep is that, in my experience, it's a bit clunky to use, but it's still worth mentioning because automated enforcement could be quite a hard sell. So you still have to set up like special filtering. So for example, if you can only mark things that are not already marked, you have to set this up yourself. As you saw in the policy, there was a tagging filter applied. And you're going to have to think a bit about your response SLA. So who owns the cloud resources and who has the authority to say, good to go, please delete it, and not good to go, please keep it. And finding how long do you have time to find these people and notify them that, hey, I'm going to destroy your cloud infra or else, right? So now for the kind of more introspective type of further speech is, how do we get there? We all love enforcement. We love getting rid of a bunch of insecure things really quickly. But how do we really get there? How do we convince our team? How do we push it through? And how do we make sure that our cloud security initiatives last for a long time? Now, this is, a long story short, something that I'm also still exploring. But here's essentially how I would go about it. The first stage is figuring out, what do your people do in the cloud? Do they do S3 websites? Cool. Do they need to run a WordPress site when they're deploying new markets or launching new products? Do they need cron jobs? And as I described before, the data platform needs a ton of cron jobs. Does the data team need Jupyter notebooks to run in SageMaker, wherever? Do you need S3 buckets to store, let's say, PDF invoices, images of people's profiles? I think the first step to kind of doing anything either outside or with Cloud Custodian is figuring out what are the kind of the green paths that you need to highlight. The second step is that everything that you have in your cloud security stack needs to be designed around these patterns. So we're going to have the best possible way to deploy an S3 website, the best possible way to run a WordPress cluster. We're going to have the best possible way to run SageMaker, to deploy AWS recognition. We're going to have the best possible way to use S3 for files or uploads or invoices. There's going to be multiple of these. And that's kind of the main thing to get from this. Once we have an understanding about the different things our cloud needs, we can get back to denying everything else. So let's say we find all of the different ways that files are stored. And let's say about 20% of them are configured in a really unexpected way. This is something that we can move to the official way. Same with S3 websites. If we have our S3 website that has been set up in a really strange way with no HTTPS, with no origin access controls, with ACLs, some weird stuff, deny. Get back to the green path. Same with EC2, same with testing infra being accessible publicly. Find the green paths and move everything else to those green paths. This is especially good if you also have services from AWS that you don't use, actually. Every now and then you would be discovering that, hey, somebody has set up a Cognito user pool. Why is that there? We don't need it. Deny. Unsafe bucket policies or weird transfers to strange root accounts. Deny it all. And that's kind of the thing that Cloud Custodian can help with. And we will always have some of these areas where things are kind of weird. For example, if you have third parties who are setting up AWS infra in your account on your behalf, for example, some enterprise SaaS stuff does this regularly. Maybe instead of giving them the entirety of the AWS account free to use, maybe you should kind of give them a sandbox. So they couldn't do specific things and they couldn't use specific configurations. Maybe the test environment for developers should be denying public access with Custodian. That's kind of easy to set up, actually. And remember, Cloud Custodian is just kind of a really good tool to fill in the gaps. Like SCPs and proper IAM design can get you a long way there. Control tower can get you a long way there. But there's still going to be gaps in the middle. And that's where you're going to need Custodian. In Bolt's experience, what we have seen is that it's not enough to kind of know where everything is. You kind of have some ground. You kind of need some ground to stand on. So kind of go through those ISO files, go through those policies that people have agreed to, figure out who owns things, figure out that your policies actually support what you're doing. Also, figure out if your testing and development infra is scoped in instead of scoped out. Think about IAC. Something that we really wanted to think about while rolling out Cloud Custodian was, what are we going to do with resources in Terraform? Are we going to destroy them? Because that's going to lead to state drift. Are we not going to destroy them, leading to risks? In the end, what we decided was to go for linters. So our linters would align with the Custodian, and this way the Cloud Custodian resources would be, Cloud Custodian policies would be filtering out Terraform stuff, because they're already covered with CI and CD. But this is a thing you have to really think about, especially in the higher risk cases, because maybe somebody's trying to mock Terraform if you detect it with a tag. This is something to think about. The main thing is that the easiest option should be the correct one. It should be possible for engineers to use the most secure practice in the most easy way. SREs love what you do. And talk to your SREs, talk what they are doing. They usually support 60, 75, 80% of what you need already. So how to get it to 100%, just kind of work with them. Do your code reviews, even for the Custodian policies. Do your CI/CD. That makes it easier for everybody to get involved. Set up your executions, set up your roles in a surgical way to avoid creating more risks. And the tiered approach is also quite useful. So just to summarize and bring everything back together, 1, be realistic. AWS has way more features available to you than your security team can cover. Figure out those green paths and optimize around them. This way, you can pull out all of the different variations of, let's say, public S3 websites to focus on a specific style of S3 website. Reduce this variance, make sure that people stick to the green paths. This way, your security team only has one different variation to worry about and the risks related to this one configuration instead of all the others. Address the variations, address the deviations by using your CSPM, your automated enforcement tools, your permissions policies to lock down and make sure people can only use the green path. And as always, leverage defense in depth. it doesn't make sense to have a public S3 bucket if you have origin access control set up. If you have origin access control set up, turn on blocking public access. With the origin access control, make sure that origins are only specific IPs. Use defense in depth. This way, you're making sure that if any single security feature fails, your entire stack stays secure. And that's basically it from me. So find me if you want to ask me something. If you don't want to ask me something, then all of the policies and the Terraform files to support this are in this GitHub repo already available. So you can actually clone this, set up the infra, and run all the demos yourself. My statistics are purely artisanal, homegrown, grass-fed, and made with generous heapings of grep and word count. I am not a Custodian developer. I don't pay for it. I don't sell it. It just kind of worked for us to fill in the gaps. Thank you.